I'm pretty sure you have heard about Generation Z, Gen Z. And what you have heard or read about them is pretty negative. For the one who don't know what is Generation Z, or who needs some clarification, let's start with a definition. Gen Z are people who are born between 1997 and 2006. Why 1997? Well, this is a moment when the internet started to spread in our houses, our jobs, and our mind. Some researchers, by the way, make the difference between the old Gen Z and the young Gen Z. The young Gen Z have never ever experienced the world without the internet. While the old Gen Z, they did, but they didn't remember. So Gen Z and 1997 represent that shift to the world we know with instant and international communication. Sounds great on the paper, but it looks like it's an handicap for the Gen Z. I told you already, they are not very loved. Let's explore some of the complaints you can read about Gen Z. Number one, they can't live without Wi-Fi. I can see some of you smiling, but I'm pretty sure you give the option to choose between food and Wi-Fi to Gen Z. They might go for Wi-Fi. Number two, they are seen as a generation with a low level of general knowledge. They don't know the basics. Number three, they are obsessed with social media, addicted to social media. They spend their time watching videos of people they have never met in the real life. They have tons of virtual friends who fake their lives, and they are desperate if you don't like their selfie. Number four, they are obsessed with money. Recruiters complain about Gen Z who negotiate their first salary. How do they dare? I mean, at the same age, they were told not to do so. And Gen Z glorifies the successful entrepreneur who build their fortune on makeup, bitcoins, or any superficial businesses. And last but not least, Gen Z, they don't know how to write a professional email. They don't know how to, they're afraid of making a phone call. And basically, they are inept with the real life because they spend their life behind a screen. You might disagree, or not, partly, with what I've just said. My name is Claire Jolin, and I've spent the last 10 years with Gen Z as a lecturer, program manager, and dean. And a few years ago, I've decided to confront my students with these complaints about their generation, to see how it resonates with them, if the complaints are real complaints or some cliché. Would you like to know about the results? Well, you have no choice, I still have a few minutes to talk. But before telling you the truth about the Gen Z, or at least my results, I would like us to spend a bit of time to explore the generation gaps in general. I was born in 1979, so at the very end of the Generation X, just before the millennials. I was raised by baby boomers, and my parents were raised by the silent generation. Why the silent generation? Well, it's because during the war and after the war, this generation had little access to communication tools, and basically no one cares about what they think. In France, where I come from, women couldn't vote before 1944. If you look at my father when he was 20 years old, the May 1968 events occurred in France. It was a period of civil unrest, where you had a lot of strikes, a lot of demonstration in the street. It was a cultural, political, social, and moral turning point for the society. My father wanted to listen to rock and roll music. He wants to party, and he wants to have sex without being married. For my grandmother, who suffered war, privation, and moral conservatism, this project was insane. Moving a few decades later, baby boomers like my father raised the first generation of kids who would struggle to achieve higher standards of living than their parents. After years of full employment, I entered the job market with the threat of unemployment. Compared to my father's hippie lifestyle, well, I started my life as a young adult with the threat of AIDS. My father had the free radio. I had the television, and Gen Z have the internet. Every generation is strongly impacted by the social, financial, political environment. And as environment changes, well, generations struggle to understand each other's. George Orwell was saying something like that. Every generation imagines itself smarter than the one who went before, and wiser than the one will come after. We believe that Gen Z, we are smarter and wiser than Gen Z. Are we? Let's go back to our complaint or cliché about Gen Z. They can't survive without Wi-Fi. Well, can we? I like to make this comparison between Wi-Fi and electricity. When I was born, electricity was there. I have no clue about the world without electricity, even if my grandmother was telling me about it. Tap water, electricity were basic needs for me. For Gen Z, tap water, electricity, and Wi-Fi are basic needs. If you go back home tonight and there is no electricity at home, it's going to be very annoying, right? Number two, they are stupid. It's true that that attention span is getting shorter compared to the other generation. 8 seconds, like a goldfish. Some researchers have observed modification in the Gen Z brain compared to the other generation. Why? Because since their youngest age, they are bombarded with information. They don't know how to get bored. Not only because they spend their time watching Netflix movies, but also because us, as parents, we have overstimulated them. As a result, they have to process a flow of data. They have to classify. They have to choose priorities. Do they manage? We'll talk about that later. Number 3, social media. Can we really blame them for social media? Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Meta, is 40 years old. It's my generation and the millennials who create tools that alienate this generation. It's like giving sugars to baby and then complaining because they love sweets. They are obsessed with money, and this one was a ha-ha moment for me when my students coming from all over the world explained to me how insecure they are with money. The 9/11, the bankruptcy of institutions like banks, even countries, damaged their faith in the bright future. They have seen people losing their houses because of the subprime crisis. They have seen parents losing their job because successful companies prefer to fire them and give them the money to the shareholders. They don't love money for money. They just are afraid of not having enough money to live. Last but not least, the inaptitude with social life and real life. Let me remind you that this generation has been strongly hit by COVID, especially the ones between 15 years old and 25 years old at that time. At their age, I was thinking that I was invincible, powerful. My goals were to enjoy life, to travel, to party, to dance, to drink, to kiss. The Gen Z were not authorized to be carefree. They were stuck in a bedroom interacting with a computer, and if they wanted to go out, well, they were told that maybe if they do so, they will kill their grandmother. For sure, it impacts your social behavior. So here we stand with a generation that is seen very superficial, afraid of missing any information in social media, and unable to speak in the real life. By the way, this is called the FOMO, the fear of missing out. But this is not the greatest fear of the Gen Z. Their greatest fear, is the FOMO, the fear of missing out. Gen Z are afraid of making things wrong. When you understand that, you can have the key to start a better relationship with them. Based on my experience with Gen Z and my conversation with peers, let me share with you 5 ways to bridge the gap, the Gen Z gap. Gen Z hate email. They love face-to-face conversation. This is one of the paradoxes because they spend a lot of time behind a screen, but they value more than anything a direct conversation. They crave for real life experience. They want your advices. They are just sometimes afraid of asking. Give that to them, and they will blossom. To help them with their short attention span, tell them the do's and the don'ts, and don't assume what is obvious for you. When I was a student, I loved when my teacher was telling me, do whatever you want. You have carte blanche. Well, if you do that with Gen Z, it might be very counterproductive, because some of them will freaking out. And they will not dare asking information, and at the end, you will have project totally out of topic or project without creativity. Gen Z, they know that social media is not the real life, but they keep searching for inspiration, for people who do what they say, for people who stand for their values and their ideas. They are afraid of people who don't say what they think. Be that person who inspires them, who is a role model, who stands for ideas. Most of our students, when they're coming back from internship, they do not complain about the workload. They complain about the management. They stress the differences between people, how people are treated. They stress the differences about what managers say and what managers do, what companies say at the corporate level and the real life of a working day. Well, you might say they are naive. I'm just saying that they have high standards. Their obsession with money is also linked with a lack of confidence. This generation, we know that they are very aware of mental health issues, and they are maybe the generation that is the most diagnosed for depression. With a world that goes faster and faster, their daily life is an emotional roller coaster. They are ambivalent. On the morning, they can be depressed. They will think they will not achieve anything. and on the afternoon. They're super motivated and they believe they will change the world, or vice versa. Well, if you want to be a good leader, a good manager, you need to take into consideration these emotions, and you need to lead with your emotion. Show them that you care, that you are happy, that you are proud, that you are surprised, or that you are disappointed. Your emotion will teach them as much as your words. By 2030, Gen Z will represent 30% of the workforce. And I've met some managers and recruiters who don't want, who refuse to change their way of managing the generation. Because they suffered when they were young professionals from tough management style, and they don't see why they would change. They even believe this is the best way to learn. Well, I don't think you can go very far if you don't change your method, especially for some industries who struggle recruiting young professionals, like the hospitality and tourism sector. They have no choice. They must adapt. Let's do a favor and a gift to this generation. Let's acknowledge the fact that there is a gap, and we need to understand it, and we need to bridge this gap. At the end, we have more things in common than things that set us apart. I told you my father had the free radio, I have the television, and Gen Z have the internet. But if I look at my life right now, my mother spends much more time than I on WhatsApp. My father advises me series to watch on Netflix, and my son calls my grandmother, his great-grandmother, on Messenger. So if my 81-year-old grandmother can jump from the silent generation to the Gen Z and the Alpha generation, I don't see why all of us in this room and beyond, we can't adapt and bridge the Gen Z gap. Thank you.